Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, 2 National Guardsmen shot in Washington, D.C. The nation's capital, a gunman opening fire on 2 armed members of the National Guard just a block from the White House in what officials say was a targeted attack.
I'm Pierre Thomas with the latest on the investigation.
2 storm systems sweeping across the U.S. on one of the busiest travel days of the year. A massive Thanksgiving storm pounding the upper Midwest, turning highways into whiteouts at the height of the holiday travel rush, while rain and mountain snow gather in the Pacific Northwest to begin their trek across the country just in time for the post-Thanksgiving trip home.
I'm Alex Perez at Chicago's O'Hare Airport with a look at what the forecast could mean for your holiday travel plans.
Just in time for Black Friday, Amazon issues a warning to 300 million users, alerting them to impersonation scams designed to steal personal information. How to spot this scam before it's too late. We all have our tried and true favorite foods over the holidays, but at what cost to your health? Dr. Darian Sutton breaks down how to spot the biggest examples of ultra-processed foods at the Thanksgiving table and easy ways to make them just a little bit healthier. And Dancing with the Stars has crowned its new Mirror Ball champions, Robert Irwin and Whitney Carson, winning the coveted Len Goodman Mirror Ball trophy for season 34. We'll take you inside the high-stakes finale.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ike Ajachi, in for Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with the targeted shooting of 2 members of the National Guard just a block from the White House, now being investigated as an act of terrorism. 1 male and 1 female service member were patrolling outside a downtown D.C. metro stop when they were ambushed and critically injured by gunfire. The Guard members received aid at the chaotic scene and were hospitalized. Fellow soldiers jumped in to subdue the suspect, who is in custody. And we've just learned that the suspect is believed to be an Afghan national. And now sources tell ABC News that the FBI is investigating the shooting as a potential act of international terrorism. President Trump deployed the National Guard as part of his effort to crack down on violent crime in Washington, D.C. and across the country. ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas leads us off.
Tonight, horror in the heart of the nation's capital. A gunman opening fire on 2 armed members of the National Guard, just 2 blocks from the White House, in what officials say was a targeted attack.
They said National Guard shot.
Everybody back up.
Gunshots erupting just after 2 p.m. near the Farragut West Metro station where the National Guard was on patrol. ABC cameraman Chris Plater telling our Jay O'Brien he overheard the gunfire.
And what I heard were, like pop, pop, pop. It could have been a steel plate or something, but then boom, boom, boom. And so I'm starting to hear these big guns.
It appears to be a lone gunman that raised a firearm and ambushed these members of the National Guard.
Let's start moving!
First responders seen racing to the scene, performing CPR, desperately trying to save those wounded Guard members. Right there on the sidewalk, shattered glass everywhere. Both victims, a man and a woman, members of West Virginia's National Guard. Tonight in critical condition after being rushed to local hospitals.
1 National Guard was lying on his side. Then I looked at the other National Guard member that was down, and I saw compressions going on.
There was countless personnel around him, and they put him in a truck, and a minute later they were gone.
Authorities describing a terrifying scene, with the suspect allegedly tracking the National Guardsmen before opening fire. Federal soldiers jumping in to stop the suspect.
They were able to, after some back and forth, able to subdue the individual and bring them into custody. They actually were able to intervene and to kind of hold down the suspect after he had been shot on the ground until law enforcement got there within moments.
Just 2 blocks from the scene, the White House put on lockdown. President Trump, who was already in Mar-a-Lago ahead of Thanksgiving, posting about the suspect on social media, saying the animal that shot the 2 National Guardsmen will pay a very steep price. The deployment of the National Guard in D.C. and other major cities has been controversial, with local authorities questioning whether they were needed with crime falling. In Washington, the National Guard has patrolled in low-crime, high-tourist locations like the National Mall and has been generally well received, by and large not involved in any controversy.
The reason that this suspect is in custody is because of the bravery of the men and women of the National Guard who responded due to their extensive training to secure American lives today.
And Pierre Thomas joins us now. Pierre, what's the latest on the suspect and the potential motive?
Well, sources tell us police believe they've identified a suspect. Tonight, there's an intensive investigation digging into the man's background to determine a motive. I'm told everything is on the table as authorities look for any ties to international or domestic terrorism. Like, they very much want to know why these guardsmen were targeted.
All right, Pierre Thomas, thank you. Now, since August, President Trump has deployed the National Guard to multiple cities, including Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and Chicago. The Trump administration is now signaling the president will send hundreds more troops to D.C. Here's ABC's Rachel Scott with late details from the White House.
Tonight, in the wake of the shooting just 2 blocks from the White House, President Trump ordering the Pentagon to send an additional 500 National Guard troops to Washington.
We will never back down. We will secure our capital. We will secure our cities. In fact, this happened just steps away from the White House. It will not stand.
President Trump pledging the man who shot the troops will pay a very steep price. Vice President J.D. Vance acknowledging the tragedy in a visit to Fort Campbell.
It's a somber reminder that soldiers, whether they're active duty, reserve, or National Guard, our soldiers are the sword and the shield of the United States of America.
And Rachel Scott joins us now from the White House. Rachel, the president was not in Washington, D.C. when this happened. What more is he saying tonight?
Yeah, well, the president says that whoever is responsible for this is going to pay a very steep price. The president down in Mar-a-Lago enjoying the Thanksgiving holiday, but I'm told he's closely monitoring this situation. And again, he plans to send an additional 500 National Guard troops here to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, Ike.
All right, Rachel Scott, thank you. Let's turn now to the storm's snarling travel as a record number of Americans are expected to hit the road for Thanksgiving. A winter storm is moving across the Midwest and Great Lakes with heavy snow and wind gusts nearing 50 miles per hour. Blizzard warnings have been issued in Michigan where more than a foot of snow is expected. Cars and trucks skidding off the roadway in Minnesota, big rigs jackknifing in blinding snow and icy conditions. Some 73 million Americans are expected to travel by car for the holiday and 6 million more by air. We'll have WABC Chief Meteorologist Lee Goldberg with the forecast in a moment, but first here's ABC's Alex Perez at Chicago's O'Hare Airport.
Tonight, the massive Thanksgiving storm pounding the upper Midwest, turning highways into white-knuckle whiteouts at the height of the holiday travel rush. Multiple jackknifed tractor trailers causing a massive pileup on I-94 in Minnesota just across the border from Fargo, North Dakota. First responders battling whipping winds as they worked to clear the scene. In North Dakota, blizzard-like conditions and icy roads, sending cars sliding. Watch as this white truck careens into a roadside ditch, narrowly missing state troopers nearby.
Numerous winter weather alerts in effect. Everything from winter storm warnings to winter weather advisories for some challenging travel conditions.
Some travelers hitting the road early.
We got up earlier. We all made the commitment. We didn't know what the roads were like.
You can see it right there on the board here at Chicago's O'Hare, one of the nation's busiest airports. Passengers are dealing with more than 1,000 delays today. And at the nation's busiest airport, Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta, officials say a KLM flight to Amsterdam was abruptly halted after a passenger opened the emergency door and deployed the slide while the plane was taxiing.
The situation getting worse, and he opened our left door, so we got a slight deployment as well.
Tonight, that man facing numerous charges, including reckless conduct. Police say he appeared to be suffering a mental health crisis.
And Alex Perez joins us now. Alex, what should travelers expect over the next couple of days?
Well, Ike, this travel headache isn't over just yet. Another powerful storm is expected to impact the Midwest after Thanksgiving and into the weekend. Ike?
All right, Alex Perez, thank you. Let's get right to WABC Chief Meteorologist Lee Goldberg. Lee, the first of the storms is hitting some areas right now.
Yeah, still seeing snow clobbering parts of Michigan, Ike, and we still have blizzard warnings in the Upper Peninsula. We could tack on another foot and a half of snow. This is into the day on Thursday, and additional snows from Traverse City down to Kalamazoo. Then you have the wind alerts from the Great Lakes all the way into western New York. See, the storm is moving into Canada, but it leaves the cold winds behind, and that will trigger the lake effect snows. You know, the Thursday Thanksgiving map, if you're waiting for last-minute travel, isn't terrible. enjoyable unless you're downwinds of the Great Lakes, and that's where it's treacherous. There's Arctic air in the Midwest, and then it's blustery all the way down the I-95 corridor. We'll have gusts in New York of 35 miles an hour. That could mean balloon restrictions for the parade, 30-mile-per-hour gusts in Philly, and then we watch the storm in the Pacific Northwest. So that starts expanding snow into the Rockies and the Plains on Friday. There's more lake effect snow, foot of snow south of Buffalo and north of Syracuse. The southern tier of the country is pretty quiet. Much different story on Saturday as the storm hits high gear. Accumulating snows along I-80, heavy rain to the south. It snows in Chicago from Saturday morning into midday Sunday, but we could put up 8-10 inches of snow, not out of the question. It lifts into the east. By the time we get to Sunday, thankfully it's warmer, so it's mostly lighter rains along the East Coast. There is some snow in upstate New York and northern New England, but major travel delays will continue through the weekend from the Northeast into the Great Lakes. Ike?
All right, Lee Goldberg, thank you for that. Horrific images of a massive high-rise inferno coming out of Hong Kong tonight. At least 7 apartment towers caught on fire, and the death toll is rising. At least 36 dead, and hundreds are still missing. The flames moved from one building to the next. Each tower stands 31 stories tall. Here's our chief international correspondent, James Longman.
Horror in Hong Kong tonight. At least 36 people are dead and more than 250 still missing in this devastating fire ripping through this huge apartment complex. 7 31-story tower blocks burning out of control for hours. Flames glowing in just about every one of the 2,000 apartments. Black smoke visible for miles around. More than 4,500 people live here, young and old, and it's unclear how much time they had to escape. Anxious residents, evacuated to nearby shelters, wait for news on their loved ones. This man's screaming for his wife, who he says couldn't get out. More than 800 firefighters and paramedics on the scene fighting the flames.
The temperature inside the buildings concerned are very high, so it's quite difficult for us to enter the building and go upstairs to conduct the firefighting and rescue operation.
The fire started at around 3 p.m. local time on the bamboo scaffold covering the buildings. By 6 p.m, a Category 5 was announced, Hong Kong's highest alert. It seems that bamboo and the green netting covering it may have accelerated the blaze, with embers jumping from building to building until the entire complex was engulfed.
Ike, it is now early morning in Hong Kong, and this fire is still burning some 16 hours later. Emergency workers will be hoping the daylight helps them bring it completely under control. Ike.
All right, James Longman, thank you for that. President Trump and White House Communication Director Steve Chung defended their personal envoy in his push to end the war in Ukraine. This comes after Steve Witkoff reportedly was overheard in leaked phone calls with the Russians, coaching them on how to handle President Trump in order to convince him to accept their demands for a peace deal with Ukraine. President Trump proposed a deadline of Thanksgiving to reach a deal, but that appears to be increasingly unlikely as the most contentious issues still seem to be unresolved. And a major legal chapter is closed for President Trump. The state of Georgia dropped the election interference case against him and his remaining co-defendants. It's the last criminal case accusing him of trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election. ABC's chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katersky has the story.
Tonight, the last case charging President Trump with crimes for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election dismissed by a Georgia judge. It was the case that produced the only presidential mugshot in American history, a picture Trump proudly hung outside the Oval Office when he returned. A sweeping indictment against Trump and more than a dozen of his allies brought by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis.
The defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result.
But the case hit a snag when Willis was disqualified over a romantic relationship with the lead prosecutor she hired. Today, a new prosecutor in charge, Pete Skandalakis, decided the citizens of Georgia are not served by pursuing this case. He argued it is not illegal to question or challenge election results. And he wrote off a key piece of evidence, Trump's phone call attempting to pressure Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
While the call is concerning, the new prosecutor wrote, reasonable minds could differ as to how to interpret the call, adding that Trump is entitled to the benefit of the doubt. The new prosecutor, Ike, also cited the U.S. Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity and said it just wasn't feasible to put Trump on trial in Georgia while he's still in office. And the decision means all of the cases charging Trump with illegally trying to overturn the 2020 election results have now been dismissed. Ike?
Aaron Katersky, thank you. Now, the Trump administration says pharmaceutical companies have agreed to lower Medicare prices for 15 prescription drugs. The reductions are expected to produce savings for taxpayers and older adults that will go into effect in 2027. Now, lower prices on an inaugural round of 10 drugs negotiated by the Biden administration last year will go into effect in January. The Biden administration said the program would have saved about $6 billion. And today, the Trump administration said this latest round would save $8.5 billion. Now, there's been a lot of questions this week in light of that video by 6 Democratic lawmakers calling on soldiers to refuse illegal orders, about what constitutes illegal orders, and how soldiers are advised. So for more, we're joined by a former military lawyer known as a JAG, Margaret Donovan. She's also received 2 Bronze Stars. Margaret, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for your time. So can you please help us understand, if a military member thought something was potentially illegal, they would come to a JAG officer and, in essence, get advice. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, precisely. And look, the UCMJ, that's the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that's the military penal code that would govern this type of dispute, and the manual for courts martial would tell you that orders are presumed lawful. And so it's a really sort of a high bar to find an order unlawful. However, if an order is to do something patently illegal or criminal, then you lose that inference of lawfulness. And you can imagine why the bar is high. When you have a system like the military, you need soldiers to be following orders, you need good order and discipline. But that falls away when you are told to do something patently illegal. And so what Senator Kelly and the other members who participated in that video were doing is probably the least controversial thing you could tell a service member, which is to act lawfully. That's what they're going to do anyway. So it is certainly not illegal for them to say that, and it is virtually unheard of to call somebody back from retirement, as the administration has said it would do for Senator Kelly, to court-martial them for telling soldiers to act lawfully. It's preposterous.
Now, Margaret, in your past experience, did you ever give anyone advice saying you thought orders were illegal?
You know, I gave advice on the rules of engagement and the law of armed conflict while I was deployed overseas. And, ideally, when you were advising soldiers, you were telling them it is presumed a lawful order. And to tell you the truth, I had the benefit of having very experienced commanders with integrity and with character, as I think most commanders in the military are. And so they know the line and they don't want to go anywhere near it. It really isn't until this administration that you have somebody as high up as the Secretary of Defense intentionally pushing the envelope and, in my opinion, putting soldiers in peril of being in this type of bind, trying to figure out what's legal and what's not. We shouldn't be asking our soldiers to do that.
Answer me this. Is there any grounds for prosecuting any of these 6 lawmakers then?
Absolutely not. And I think it's very telling that Secretary Hegseth has sort of ran to the UCMJ and said he may, call Senator Kelly back from retirement. That's probably because there is no universe in the civilian world where anything that they did is criminal in nature. And sure enough, if Senator Kelly's investigation proceeds in the military justice world as well, it will be found to be perfectly lawful. What has happened, interestingly, by the president's comments online and by Secretary Hegseth's comments, is they have developed a very good defense, if this were to proceed either in a civilian criminal court or in a military court, of unlawful command influence. And that occurs when somebody at the top of the chain of command or above a person who is bringing charges within the chain of command dictates, either expressly or impliedly, that charges should be brought or the outcome of the case. And that is precisely what has happened here. It's basically the military equivalent of vindictive or selective prosecution. We've seen that play out in criminal cases in the U.S., Kilmar Abrego Garcia and Attorney General James and others. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. We're seeing the president make these comments that is already sort of tanking the case as if he had one, as being sort of tainted by unlawful command influence.
Now, Margaret, give me some insight here. Could this whole thing have a chilling impact on members of the military, even asking if orders are illegal?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the real, I don't know if it's the intended effect, it's certainly the actual consequence here, which is that the military justice system, believe it or not, has pretty robust due process built into it. If somebody is going to be facing a felony level charge, they get a sort of preliminary hearing, a probable cause hearing before that. They can opt for a jury of a trial of their peers. So I actually think that the due process apparatus that is in place will prevent this from moving forward in a criminal posture. However, that chilling effect that you talked about of either chilling senators or other leaders within government from speaking out, or from soldiers themselves being too worried to ask whether or not an order is lawful, that's really problematic. You do not want to have a military who is too scared to ask or to question the orders of their commanders. Now, you have to balance that, right? Like I said from the beginning, that orders are presumed lawful. But when you have people who are pushing the envelope, as the current leadership in the Department of Defense is, you want soldiers to, follow their oath to the Constitution, to follow their own moral compass, and you just hope that they continue to do the right thing. I think our soldiers have integrity. American soldiers have fortitude and strength of character, and I think that will come through.
All right, Margaret Donovan, thank you for your insight. Now, as the holiday season kicks into gear, Amazon is alerting its 300 million users about a common scam targeting shoppers. Now, the company says cyber criminals are reaching out to customers in an attempt to get access to sensitive information like personal or financial information related to account details. Amazon warns that the cyber criminals may use an impersonation process involving browser notifications. Coming up, we look at the science, marketing, and demand for processed and ultra-processed foods and how to navigate your Thanksgiving menu tomorrow. And national parks are getting more expensive, but not for most people. And British star Benedict Cumberbatch joins us to talk about his newest project, starring alongside a giant crow. The types of food we consume have changed drastically over the past decades. We eat far more processed foods with flavors and colorings forged in laboratories, often trading substance for convenience. From frozen dinners to fast food to even a store-bought apple, most food on store shelves has been processed in some ways. This progress in food science has indeed helped feed the world, but at what cost to our health? ABC News medical correspondent Dr. Darian Sutton breaks down the science, marketing, and demand for processed and ultra-processed foods in an ABC News Live half-hour special called Gut Check, The Foods We Eat. Here's a peek.
My life was very busy prior to Daily Harvest. They gave this sense that they were sourcing their food carefully from farmers, that they were having a higher standard for their food, and that we were eating organic, vegan food.
Seattle resident Sarah Schott initially bought Daily Harvest prepackaged meals to make her life easier. She wanted to keep a healthy diet.
Daily Harvest customers trusted the brand because of their marketing.
At Daily Harvest, we speak your food language. Spread love the Daily Harvest way.
But Sarah fell ill. She says she was sickened from terraflower and the lentil and leek crumbles from Daily Harvest. Terraflower is derived from a plant found in South America and is an additive that has not been vetted by the FDA.
I had undescribable abdominal agony, and my extremities were so cold I couldn't get warm.
The products from Daily Harvest ended up being linked to close to 400 illnesses across 39 states. The lentil and leek crumbles were voluntarily recalled in June of 2022. In a statement to ABC News, Daily Harvest says they've since adopted a stricter review of ingredients and now only use ingredients with a proven track record of safe use in the US or the EU. Sarah says she received an award letter of $15,000 from Daily Harvest, but has yet to see any money. Daily Harvest said they fulfilled the terms of the settlement.
I do not feel protected by the American food system. We've created a food system where essentially you can import on a pinky promise.
Sarah's illness happened because of the way the American government oversees our food supply. The Food and Drug Administration abides by the GRAS principle, which stands for Generally Recognized as Safe. A legal loophole allows companies to declare an additive as generally recognized as safe without a formal safety review. In 2024, after the recall, the FDA declared that there wasn't enough data on taro flour to consider it GRAS, therefore restricting its use as a food ingredient.
We have a system when a company is designing a food product and they're picking the ingredients to put in there, they're in charge of deciding whether the ingredients are safe.
So through generally recognized as safe, companies are able to skip over some of the processes of safety in order to get additives.
They skip almost over all of them.
In a statement to ABC News, the Department of Health and Human Services says that under RFK Jr., the FDA is, quote, developing a proposed rule to require mandatory GRAS submissions for new substances, ending self-GRAS determinations, adding that this newly proposed rule is in final review. When food makers add additives and take other steps to refine their food, that food is typically referred to as ultra-processed. It's impossible to talk about the American diet without mentioning them. In a study published by the CDC in August, people aged 1 to 18 consumed over 60% of their calories from ultra-processed foods. For adults, it was a little lower, around 50%.
Can you grab me a lemon?
But Gretchen Adler, a health and wellness content creator, is forging a different path when it comes to her family's diet.
How was it? Mama, it's really good. Can I try? Yeah. Strong. Extra virgin olive oil, organic. I've been on Instagram since Instagram launched.
Here's everything I made for my 4-year-old's birthday party.
And I started showcasing what I was making in the kitchen. People were very interested in what I was showing, from homemade butter to homemade sour cream. As you can see, this meat is extremely tender, super soft. It cooked at a low temperature.
Gretchen says she's always led a clean and healthy lifestyle, and she isn't alone.
Let's make healthy foods affordable.
For years, there has been a growing online movement around so-called healthy and clean eating.
Taking back your family's health, their well-being, and their future back into our hands.
And Health Secretary RFK Jr. embraced this trend as a part of his Make America Healthy Again initiative, later backed by the Trump administration. While the Trump administration adopted the rhetoric of the MAHA movement, they have at the same time rolled back regulations and cut programs that supported fresh, locally sourced foods. But the conversation around ultra-processed foods has continued to dominate public attention.
When MAHA started, it really aligned with me. I personally never want to be involved politically, but what the MAHA stands for is what I stand for as well.
A study by the CDC shows that lower-income Americans consume more calories from ultra-processed foods than families with the highest income, highlighting how time and food access helps shape nutrition. Gretchen insists, though, that her content is for everyone.
Thank you so much. This is not geared to one specific person. I truly believe that everybody should live like this. I think it just takes education, and at a minimum, if we can have the food standards that Europe has, that would be a huge win.
Europeans don't adhere to the GRAS principle like the FDA. Instead, a product or additive must be proven safe before it hits grocery stores.
We really do wait till our house is on fire to solve a problem. Where in Europe they're saying, it's better to prevent some of these problems because we may not have the resources and expertise to do it.
In France, food and culture are inseparable. The baguette, for instance, has protected UNESCO heritage status. The bread staple in America tends to be sliced bread, and ABC's Maggie Rulli went to a French grocery store on the hunt to find it.
So I actually just found this in this French store. It's American-style sandwich bread. It only has around 8 ingredients.
In America, sliced bread is generally considered ultra-processed. According to a study in the European Journal of Nutrition, Sweden and the UK ranked the highest in ultra-processed food consumption in Europe, tied at over 40%, still much lower than the roughly 55% average of the United States.
The most important thing is that we fix our food system and that there's real teeth in how we regulate it. We have to think about a more comprehensive system that serves the needs of all Americans.
Our thanks to Dr. Sutton and Maggie Ruley. You can see more of Dr. Sutton's reporting in the ABC News Live special Gut Check, The Foods We Eat, available to stream now on Disney Plus and Hulu. All right, Dr. Sutton joins us now to talk more about ultra-processed foods, specifically how to navigate the menu tomorrow. Dr. Sutton, always a pleasure to have you here on Beyond Set.
Happy pre-Thanksgiving.
Yeah, there we go, there we go. Now, we know that a lot of our Thanksgiving favorites are considered ultra-processed, especially those sides. So which ones are actually the worst?
Well, number one, you want to remember that this holiday is about connection, it's about comfort, and obviously about food. Now, what we're going to talk about is not about taking meals or food off the table, but helping to navigate with intention, because once you know what's in it and how it's made, you can make decisions here and there, swapping out certain things, swapping in certain things to improve your health. Now, when it comes to the biggest offenders, when you're talking about ultra-processed foods, it's typically often those that are most favored during the holiday. That includes stuffing, box stuffing specifically, canned cranberries, canned gravy, packaged biscuit dough, pre-made mac and cheese, that's a very popular one, as well as whipped toppings. Now, all of these are considered ultra-processed, and again, they're not all bad, but you want to make sure that you can identify so you can figure out how to limit where you can.
Now, you have a method for navigating this, and I love this method. The 3 R's, all right? Recognize, replace, and reduce. And this is also for navigating those ultra-processed foods. So I want to start with the first one, which is the recognize. So tell me about this method.
Well, we grab a lot of these products because they are fast, they are affordable, and they are familiar. And once you start realizing exactly how to recognize those patterns, then it becomes pretty obvious. So when you're trying to identify an ultra-processed foods, there are key things you'll notice. For example, long ingredient lists, several lines long, like we saw in the piece. Preservatives, that helps to keep it shelf stable. Added colors, that makes it vibrant. And then the salt, the fat, the sugar, this makes it delicious. Now, Ike, this doesn't mean that it's all bad, but these signs help you to understand that it's more likely to be engineered rather than homemade.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's get to the second one, the replace, all right? This is the one that I'm very interested in.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we can switch out to make our meal better?
Yeah, so some practical steps we can do. Number one, you want to focus on swapping in certain things. Again, focusing on whole foods, whole grains, vegetables, lean proteins, focusing on how you can find these things. And when you're in the grocery store, you want to stay around the perimeter before you move into the aisle. That's how you're going to stock up on these items.
All right, and this one is very important, the reduce, all right? Tell us all about this one.
Yeah, so this is about making decisions with those popular products that can reduce the amount of processed and ultra-processed ingredients and improve or increase the amount of whole grain. So we can start with stuffing, and the reason why is because it's my favorite. So box stuffing is known to be delicious, but one of the reasons is because it's high in sodium. And so that's one of the reasons we always grab for it. Now, if you want to make stuffing yourself, you only need a couple of ingredients to do so. Whole grain bread, some onions, some celery, some low sodium broth. Now, the directions in how you make it obviously can be to taste and different from person to person, but starting with those basic ingredients, again, onions, celery, whole grain bread, that's how you convert something from an ultra processed component to your Thanksgiving meal to a less processed, more whole food item.
All right, now the next thing is crucial for me. I love making those sandwiches the next day with the turkey and the cranberry sauce, right? So what are we doing about cranberry sauce?
So we're gonna try to step away from canned cranberry sauce.
Okay.
I used to eat that by the spoon when I was a kid. And so there's certain things that you can do when you wanna make fresh cranberry sauce. You just need some cranberries, some water, some sugar, and other natural sweeteners. Again, there are different ways you can make it, but if you wanna start with a list of items to get in the grocery store, this is where you begin. And again, it's a lot easier than you think.
All right. Now, canned gravy, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one. And that's a big source of artificial flavors. And one of the reasons it tastes so delicious is because those flavors were engineered to taste that way. But you can make your own gravy by pan drippings and adding some flour or cornstarch. And again, low sodium broth. This is, again, a way for us to decrease and reduce the artificial preservatives, the artificial flavors, and to increase, the important things that we want, which are whole foods.
Now, don't mess me up on this one, okay?
Okay.
The packaged biscuit, though. Don't take away my biscuits now.
Some people, you have to fight for this, and the reason why is because the saturated fat is delicious. So if you want to reach for, less packaged or less processed biscuits, you want to reach for whole grain breads, and you can use butter or olive oil. Again, I'm not trying to hold back things like butter. You can use it, but keeping to ingredients that are whole foods can help navigate away from those processed ingredients.
All right, now we're talking about a big staple next, okay?
Yes, we are.
The mac and cheese, pre-made mac and cheese.
Yeah, again, that's a big time issue here because obviously Obviously, mac and cheese can be difficult, especially if you're my mom. She makes enough for the entire town.
Right.
So when you're trying to make your own mac and cheese, all you need to do is some cooked pasta, some cheddar, and some milk, and a pan to do so in. Again, when you're at the grocery store, think about these items that you can grab, and think about how much time it's taking you, and then you can weigh the risks and the benefits depending on what you're trying to plan for your whole meal.
All right, we got the turkey, we got the mac and cheese, the cranberry sauce. It's time for the desserts and that wonderful whipped topping that we always see on top of our pies and cakes.
Yeah.
What can we do about that?
You know, everyone knows whipped topping from the canned whipped cream that you can get out of the fridge, and then you try your best not to eat the whole thing. Again, reaching for real whipped cream is a great option. It might not last as long and be the same texture that the canned whipped cream would be. But again, you're reaching for something that is whole foods. Not necessarily going to be the worst thing if you reach for the can, but if you have time, reaching for the real whipped cream is going to make all the difference, and it's going to make it even taste better.
All right, the real stuff and the 3 R's.
Exactly. You got to make sure you recognize it, make sure you reduce it, and make sure you replace where you can.
Dr. Darian Sutton, always with the useful information. Thanks a lot.
Of course.
All right, coming up, Thanksgiving travel can be a headache, but likely not as hectic as the journey in the 1987 classic Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. From car mishaps to detrimental flight diversions, how much that chaos would cost today? By the numbers.
I'm usually very good with names, but I'll be damned if I haven't forgotten yours.
You stole my cab.
I've never stolen anything in my life.
I hailed a cab on Park Avenue this afternoon, and before I could get in it, you stole it.
You're the guy who tried to get my cab. I knew you, yeah.
And so begins the journey in the 1987 classic Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, starring Steve Martin as Neil and the late John Candy as Dell, 2 strangers navigating a series of travel mishaps to get to Chicago in time for Thanksgiving. Their 3-day journey involved all those modes of transportations in the title suggests and more, making it a very costly week. But what if that were to happen today? How much would they have to spend in order to get home? Well, let's look at Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in 2025 by the numbers. Neil was planning to fly first class from New York to Chicago. His ticket today would cost $979. He's reassigned to sit in coach with Dell, whose coach ticket would cost $495 today. Now, when their flight gets diverted to Wichita, they share that last room at a motel, comparable to a Motel 6, which now would cost just under $54 for a night. Now, they board a train to Chicago the next day with tickets that would each cost about $202. Now, the train breaks down, and they take a bus from Jefferson City, Missouri to St. Louis that would cost just under $42 per ticket now. Then Neil tries to rent a car from the airport, which now would cost $85 for a day. And that car was missing, but he eventually reunited with Dell in another car. Now, when that car and Neil's credit cards catch fire, Neil pays for another motel room with a watch that would be today worth almost $25,000. Now, the next day, they drive and catch a milk truck that finally gets them to Chicago, where the Chicago L train to Neil's home today would be a $6 ticket. Now, with all these costs and more, including meals, cabs, and Neil and Dell getting robbed at one point, Neil spent the equivalent of $2,441.35, not including that watch. As for Dell, he would have spent $930.97. Coming up, a Disney favorite, an impossibly popular K-pop character, and the year's most coveted toy. See the additions to this year's Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Plus, grief. It's inescapable, but it's also a pain that can bind us. Star Benedict Cumberbatch and writer-director Dylan Southern are bringing grief to life in the new film, The Thing with Feathers, answering the question, what is life after loss? International tourists can soon expect to pay more to visit national parks in the U.S. Plus, from a classic Disney character to a new face from one of the most popular Netflix movies of all time. Meet the newest balloons debuting at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And your season 50 Dancing with the Stars champion proves that sometimes mirror balls run in the family. These stories and more in tonight's rundown. The National Park Service says it'll start charging more for international tourists to visit some of America's most popular national parks. An annual parks pass for foreigners is set to jump by $100. They'll also be excluded from fee-free days, and the Trump administration says the changes are designed to keep access affordable for Americans. A would-be food influencer known online as the Dine and Dash Diva has been jailed in Brooklyn after multiple previous arrests for allegedly skipping out on the bill at high-end restaurants. Authorities say Pei Chung developed a habit of going to fancy restaurants around New York City, ordering extensively off the menu, and then trying to get out of paying. She was arraigned on a theft of service charge, as well as failing to show up in court on previous Dine and Dash warrants. Her bail is set at $4,500. Hawaii's spectacular Kilauea putting on a show. Lava soared as high as 400 feet into the air on Tuesday, and Kilauea is one of the world's most active volcanoes. This latest eruption began back in December, and there's currently no danger to the public. And early this morning, an earthquake of 4.6 magnitude struck on the southern side of the volcano. It was felt as far away as Honolulu. Some new additions are here for the 99th annual Macy's Thanksgiving Parade in New York. There'll be 5 new balloons, including Buzz Lightyear and Derpy Tiger from K-pop Demon Hunters, and new floats, including one dedicated to Labubus. The parade begins rain or shine on Manhattan's Upper West Side and ends at Macy's Herald Square flagship store on 34th Street, which serves as a stage and backdrop for performances. Now, this year's parade will feature 34 balloons, 4 mini balloons, 28 floats, 33 clown groups, and 11 marching bands, all leading the way for Santa Claus. The Olympic flame is beginning its journey to the Milan Cortina Winter Games, missing a little of its usual magic. Bad weather in Greece forced organizers to move the torch lighting ceremony indoors from Olympia's ancient stadium to a nearby museum. Now, the torch will be carried across the country to Italy by about 10,000 runners over the course of 63 days before competition begins on February 6th. Dancing with the Stars has crowned its new Mirror Ball champions. After a high-stakes season 34 finale, Robert Irwin and Whitney Carson won the coveted Len Goodman Mirror Ball trophy after performing final dance numbers. Finalists also included Alex Earl, Val Shmerkovsky, Dylan Efron, and Daniela Karagach, Jordan Childs and Ezra Sosa, and Elaine Hendricks, and Alan Bernstein. Now, the winners of this season were determined by a combination of live viewer votes from the night as well as the scores from judges. Robert Irwin's sister, Bindi Irwin, won the Mirror Ball with partner Derek Huff 10 years earlier. Emily Dickinson once wrote that hope is the thing with feathers. But what happens when hope manifests as grief instead? Well, in the new film, The Thing with Feathers, Benedict Cumberbatch and writer-director Dylan Southern tackled this question head-on. Prime anchor Linsey Davis got the chance to sit down with them, but before we hear from them, let's take a look.
I don't want that. I don't want her turned into a series of anecdotes because it just reminds me that she's gone.
But she is gone.
Yeah, but if I'm lucky once or twice a week, I think she's going to be back in a minute. She's going to be back.
Dylan, Benedict, thank you both so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
So let's talk about, I mean, obviously it's a highly acclaimed novel, The Thing with Feathers. What made you all decide, one, that you wanted to adapt it and become a movie, but Benedict, that you wanted to be a part of it?
I think it's a similar story to Dylan's in the sense that when I first read the book, it was immediately very pictorial, cinematic, and kind of had a scale to it that I could imagine being film. However, I didn't immediately think, oh, that's adaptable. I mean, it's so fantastical and extreme in its poeticism and breadth. But at the same time, very often when I read a book, I'm casting it or seeing a shot or just imagining it as a piece of drama. And 10 years went by whilst this man was actually picking up the heavy load of doing the impossible and adapting it.
10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, the book came out in 2015 and I was given a copy by my friend, not thinking that I would make it into a film. He just knew my taste in books and said, you'll really like this, and I read it. I was kind of blown away by what Max managed to do on the page, and I sort of set about trying to get hold of Max and meeting him and persuading him to give me, a filmmaker who hadn't yet made a dramatic feature, the rights to the book, which he did. And then you know, it was the process of being a first-time filmmaker and finding the right people who would support me to make the film.
And Benedict, you've described it before as an odd job, really, co-starring opposite of a giant crow.
Yeah.
What made you able to even visualize and see that leap before it was together?
No, I guess the usual thing of imagining a reality that isn't there. And you know, there's a lot of this which is very sort of finely attuned psychological truth and nuanced drama around the sort of verite of grief, of what that is, how it takes hold of your body and your emotional landscape, your response to it. And at the same time, I was on set with two extraordinary boys, the Boxall brothers, who were new to acting, and an amazing Lecoq-trained mime artist and physical actor, Eric, who was in this crow costume with an animatronic head that made quite a lot of noise, as well as him underneath it doing a pretty decent David Thewlis impression, but still not David Thewlis. And yeah, there were lots of elements that were not there that had to be there. I kind of get used to that from the Marvel work, I guess I do. But in that world, it's more fantastical all round, whereas this, I was trying to hold on to something that was very naturalistic in amongst all these elements that were, yes, very artificial in a way.
You all mentioned the boys, they were 7 years old, Richard and Henry, at the time that you shot the film.
Yeah.
What did that bring? I mean, they do a fantastic job themselves.
Well, we did a huge casting call and we saw so many kids, and a lot of them, you know, went to drama school or had been trained, and the thing that Henry and Richard had is they were just Henry and Richards. And as soon as I found a video the other day from one of the early casting sessions, and the boys were all doing exercises, and I should have been filming the two boys that were doing the exercise at that point, but my camera just kept drifting back to Richard and Henry watching, and there's just something so mesmerizing about them. And you know, they'd never acted before, and we had to accommodate that on set. You know, Benedict was incredible with them in terms of kind of showing them what it means to be someone else on camera. So it was just, you know, adapting the directing approach to suit the minds of two really funny young 7-year-olds who had a wicked sense of humour and made the set an amazing place to be every day.
They really did. And you know, when you're working with something as raw as their truth, it's like capturing lightning in a jar, and when you've got it, you can't really better it.
Of course, your character, we meet him, he's really at the lowest low for a father, now a single dad, and at the same time, he's swallowed by grief, but trying to keep the same sentiment of regular, everyday routine for his children. Give us a sense of what you hope, what you take away from it, and what you hope viewers will take away from the movie as well.
Well, I think the responses we've had, despite the sort of the metaphor used, which seems so extreme and unique, it's a very universal experience, grief. Hopefully what we've done with the film is provide a singular experience with this character, but it does speak universally to what that inevitability of being a human being is. It comes to all of us in our life, and I think there's hope in it, and it is a story of salvation in the sense that especially through the love that this unit have for one another, how the children proffer their love and give him strength in unexpected moments, but also how through the chaos of being out of control, it's also all right to look at this and understand that we aren't in control of our emotions. It's all right to feel unwell, to feel chaotically lost in something that is at times just too overwhelming to be orderly with, and that's all right to be tolerant of that and understand it's part of the human condition. So it's both giving permission for people to say, yes, no, grief is a mess. It's difficult and it's constant. And also to feel that there is hopefully some salvation in learning to live with it by the end.
Dylan, Benedict, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Our thanks to Linsey. You can watch Benedict Cumberbatch in The Thing with Feathers beginning Friday in theaters nationwide. That's our show for this hour. I'm Mike Ajachi. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks for streaming with us.